Army's tactical tracked vehicles are designed to have extraordinary mobility. It is this mobility which gives them their special fighting capabilities. Tracked vehicles can move over terrain where there are no roads, areas that no ordinary wheeled vehicle could traverse. These killers throw their own private bridge across ditches. Obstacles, up and over. They can negotiate steep hills. The M59 personnel carrier can even swim when necessary. The combat effectiveness of these vehicles always depends upon the speed with which a commander can move them from one advantageous position to another. You don't have to soldier very long in an army unit to learn that the mobility of these fighting machines depends almost entirely upon the quality and quantity of preventive maintenance given them. Take a thrown track, a squad of infantrymen immobilized, fouling up a commander's plans. And if this were an actual combat situation, exposing the whole platoon to extra hazards, all because the suspension system was not properly inspected when it should have been. Another example of trouble because proper preventive maintenance procedures were not carried out. The transmission steering linkage was not inspected, so no one discovered that the linkage bolt was loose. Vibration backed the nut off and eventually backed the bolt out of the linkage. Precious time needlessly lost. Every armor unit requires trained mechanics capable of performing second echelon maintenance on its tracked vehicles. Second echelon maintenance is the highest level of organizational maintenance. These students are being taught to perform inspections, tests, adjustments, repairs, and parts replacement that fall within the scope of second echelon maintenance. All organizational maintenance is classed as preventive maintenance. There are certain minor differences in the mechanisms and controls of the various types and series of tactical tracked vehicles, but second echelon maintenance is basically the same. When a tank is scheduled for a second echelon maintenance service, it must first be taken out for a road test to determine its condition. We are going to use this M48A2 tank to illustrate the road testing procedure. An organizational mechanic has been assigned to the job. The driver and at least one other member of the crew will assist him. In this case, the driver and the loader will assist the mechanic. Before taking the tank out on the road, the mechanic makes a before-operation inspection to determine whether the tank is operational. The items listed on the appropriate report forms constitute the mechanic's checklist. First, he looks under the tank for evidence of leaks. Then he checks the fuel level in both tanks. This gives the mechanic an easy check on the accuracy of the fuel gauges. He checks the main engine oil level. It should indicate full. He checks the auxiliary engine oil. It should indicate full without the dipstick being screwed down. Then he checks the transmission for presence of oil. The dipstick should indicate full or above. The mechanic makes a careful inspection of the engine compartment for evidence of fuel or oil leaks, testing by hand grasp the security of fuel injector lines and brackets. air induction tubes and clamps, auxiliary engine connections, crankcase vent lines, and the ignition harness. He also checks the gun travel lock for security. And while he's on the top deck, he checks the loader's escape hatch cover and the commander's cupola door to be sure they lock in the open position. Though the driver may assist the mechanic in noting deficiencies, the responsibility for their correctness is the mechanic's. The mechanic spot checks the hand tools and publications issued for the vehicle. Unserviceable equipment as well as missing items will be noted on the report form. The mechanic must make certain inspections in the driver's compartment. He inspects the fixed fire extinguisher system before starting the engines, testing the mounting brackets for security, making sure that all connections are tight. The single cylinder on the other side is part of the same system. If he should find the seal broken on the inside pull handle, all 3 cylinders of the system must be removed and weighed to determine whether they are fully charged. If the seal on the outside is found to be broken, the same procedure is followed. The mechanic checks the service brake system. He takes the shift lever out of the parking position and puts it into neutral. Then he depresses the service brake pedal. There should be approximately 4 inches clearance between brake pedal and floor. The equalizer bar should be straight, and the levers on the cross shaft should be vertical when the pedal is fully depressed. To test the parking brake, he fully applies the service brake pedal, puts the shift lever in the park position, and removes his foot from the pedal. If it remains in the depressed position, the parking brake is okay. For the next steps in the before operation inspection, the mechanic will need to be outside the vehicle, so the driver takes over the controls. The mechanic may request the loader to check the essential turret accessories, the dome light switches and bulbs, the ventilator blower switch and airstream, and the portable fire extinguisher. He makes sure the seal has not been tampered with. The driver has already turned the master relay switch on and noted that the switch indicator light went on. He also checked the driver's dome lights, the horn. The mechanic checks all outside lights. The service lights are checked for proper direction of beams. He checks the blackout drive light. To see the blackout marker, he must shield his eyes from the surrounding light. The infrared lights can't be seen by the naked eye, but give off heat when on. Rear lights are checked, the service tail lights, the service stop light. The rear blackout light and the blackout stop light. Now is a good time to inspect the final drive vents to be sure they are free and clean. Before starting the main engine, the mechanic will check the transmission shifting linkage and the steering linkage. The driver will manipulate the controls as required. With the shifting control lever in neutral, the transmission linkage indicator should be in line with the neutral punch mark. And move to low, high, reverse, and back to neutral as the shifting lever is moved into these positions. The mechanic makes a similar test of the steering linkage. With the wheel turned to full left, the indicator should line up with the letter L. When the steering wheel is released, it should return to its central position, and the linkage control indicator should line up with the center punch mark. Wheel full right should put the indicator at the letter R, but it does not. Something is wrong in the steering linkage, probably a bent control rod or a faulty adjustment. The mechanic will correct this defect on the spot. The first check is to see whether the horizontal steering linkage rod is bent. It's bent all right. The rear door ledge offers a good flat surface to hammer it straight. He reinstalls the linkage control rod and tests it again. That did it. The mechanic checks the engines and their associated controls before inspecting the suspension system. This is good procedure. The driver and loader replace the transmission shield and close the engine compartment access doors. The mechanic starts the auxiliary engine before starting the main engine, thus assuring himself of sufficient electrical power to start the main engine. If everything's okay, he pushes the choke throttle in after a warm-up period of approximately 5 minutes. Before starting the main engine, the mechanic checks for hydrostatic lock. To do this, the shifting lever must be in park position and the magneto and booster switches in the off position. The mechanic closes the starter switch and holds it until the engine is cranked through at least 2 revolutions. If the engine does not stop during the cranking action, there is no hydrostatic lock. With the shift lever in park and the steering wheel locked in center position, the mechanic proceeds to start the main engine. When he puts the magneto switch in the both position, all warning lights should go on, and the fuel gauges should register the known amount of fuel in the tanks. The warning light marked left engine is the generator no charge warning light. As soon as the engine starts cranking, he primes the engine until it runs smoothly. Never use the primer unless the engine is cranking or running. The main engine low lube pressure warning light should go off within 10 seconds after the engine starts. The mechanic holds the booster switch closed until the engine speed reaches 300 to 500 RPM. At approximately 900 RPM, all other warning lights should be off. Now, using the hand throttle, he accelerates the engine to a fast idle, approximately 1,000 RPM, for a warm-up period of 3 to 5 minutes. During this warm-up period, he particularly watches the engine oil pressure. The gauge indicator should slowly level off at 70 to 80 pounds. With the engine warmed up and running at a fast idle, one of the mechanic's assistants checks the transmission oil level. It should register full. The mechanic is informed that the transmission oil level is okay. He can now make an engine performance test. With the magneto switch in the both position, he accelerates the engine to 2,500 RPM. And sets the hand throttle to hold it at 2,500. Then he moves the magneto switch to the F position and observes the tachometer for RPM decrease. If the drop is less than 225 RPM, the flywheel magnetos are okay. He returns the mag switch to both and leaves it there until the tach again reads 2,500. He performs the same test with the mag switch in the A position. If the drop is less than 225 RPM, the accessory magnetos are okay. Caution, do not leave the magneto switch in either the A or F position for longer than 1 minute. At the conclusion of the magneto drop tests, he returns the hand throttle to the close position. The engine should run smoothly at a normal idle speed of 650 RPM. Since the engine performance has been satisfactory thus far, he accelerates the engine to wide open throttle and checks the engine no-load govern speed. The engine speed should go to 3,000 RPM. If it exceeds or doesn't reach 3,000 RPM, the governor setting needs correction. The mechanic is now ready to inspect the suspension system. Leaving the engine running at normal idle, he again changes places with the driver. The tank must be coasted at least 2 lengths on level ground in order to get a dependable indication of the tension of the tracks. Coasting the tank to a stop brings any sag in a track to the top, where it can easily be detected. Visually inspecting the top of each track, the mechanic looks for dead track blocks before checking the track tension. To check track tension, he places a 1x6 block of wood with a string attached under the number 2 support roller. The other end of the string is placed under the number 3 roller in a manner that will keep it taut. At a point midway between the 2 rollers, he measures the distance between the string and the track. If the distance is between 1/8 and 3/16 of an inch, the track tension is okay. Loose mounting flange nuts on the wheels. Flaked paint around a nut usually indicates it is worked loose. This should be corrected before going out. If a tire base separation on any wheel is less than 1 1/8 of an inch, it may be disregarded. If tire cuts or breaks are no longer than 1 inch to 1.5 inches, they may also be disregarded. But larger breaks and separations will be noted on the report form for later replacement. He inspects all hubcaps for loose bolts, missing or damaged pressure relief valves, blown gaskets, and defective grease seals. He checks all snubbers for condition of the weld of the plunger and security of the mounting. A loose mounting will be corrected on the spot. He makes a visual inspection of the bumper springs. A broken spring is easily spotted. It's either broken or it's not broken. He inspects the drive sprockets for security of mounting. He checks the towing hooks and towing pintle to see they are properly keyed and not damaged. After he has inspected both sides of the suspension system, he marks a dividing line between the top and bottom of the tracks and moves the tank forward one length in order to get another section of tracks on top. The chalk marks are the mechanic's guide. He now checks this section of track for dead blocks, loose wedges, and loose wedge bolts. He finds a loose wedge bolt and marks it. It will be tightened before going out. To do this, he must bring the loose wedge bolt directly over the center of the forward arc of the idler wheel. This is the only way to properly tighten wedge bolts. Finally, move the tank forward enough to gain access to and tighten the center guide. To check the torsion bars, the mechanic uses the tank bar to put lift pressure on each road wheel. If he cannot raise the wheel, the torsion bar is okay. This concludes the before operation inspection and service. The mechanic will drive the vehicle throughout the road test. He and the driver will wear headsets for intercommunication. The loader rides in the turret, listening for unusual noises. When the tank reaches a speed of 5 miles per hour, the mechanic applies the brake to determine whether the tank will stop quickly and evenly. He also notes the reserve clearance of the brake pedal. It should be at least 4 inches. Moving again, he observes whether the tank tends to lead to the right or left. The mechanic will check the engine for acceleration and pulling power in both forward ranges. When accelerated to wide open throttle, the engine should develop full power 2800 RPM, which is the maximum governed speed under load. The mechanic releases the accelerator pedal a number of times to ascertain whether the engine has a tendency to stall. If any unusual noise or vibration becomes evident, the mechanic would stop the tank and investigate. Malfunctions endangering the vehicle would be corrected on the spot. He tests the response of the steering mechanism to movement of the steering wheel. He stops on a steep incline to test the parking brake. By this time, the mechanic will have checked the instrument panel several times, particularly the engine oil pressure gauge. Suppose the generator warning light goes on, indicating the generator is not charging the batteries. This will not immobilize the tank, so the mechanic merely notes the malfunction on the report form. He will give the vehicle a good workout in all forward and reverse speed ranges to bring out any unusual vibrations or noises that would indicate damage due to excessive wear, loose mountings, or improper functioning of a component. After a run of about 5 miles all told, the mechanic takes the tank to the organizational maintenance area, where he will make an after-road test inspection before proceeding to correct all those deficiencies which fall within the scope of second echelon preventive maintenance. He coasts the tank to a stop without steering in order to have another check on the tension of the tracks. Leaving the engine running, the mechanic again changes places with the driver. He inspects the engine compartment for fuel and oil leaks. Checks the transmission oil level with the engine running. and, after instructing the driver to stop the engine, checks the engine oil level. He looks under the tank for evidence of fuel and oil leaks. Inspects the final drive housings for abnormal heat. If one is appreciably hotter than the other, he will note the condition for later investigation. He again makes a complete inspection of the suspension system. He may find an abnormally hot wheel hub, indicating insufficient lubrication or a damaged bearing. He may find a broken snubber plunger, or a cold snubber, which indicates that it is not functioning. There may be one or more loose bolts in any component. He may find a sag in the track. The track adjustment was correct at the before operation inspection. Now the tension is incorrect. Could be a broken torsion bar. He again applies lift pressure under the road wheels. That's what it is. After the mechanic has performed the complete second echelon preventive maintenance service on the tank, and all deficiencies have been corrected to the satisfaction of the maintenance chief, the mechanic will take the tank out for another short road test to verify the accuracy of his work. This fighting equipment is very rugged, as we know, but it is also very complex. Every component must be in perfect working order if the tank is to deliver the kind of performance in mobility and firepower that a commander in the field has a right to expect. Road testing a tactical tracked vehicle is perhaps the most vital part of a scheduled second echelon service. It calls for the most painstaking kind of thoroughness. The mechanic who knows his business and takes pride in this knowledge will have that kind of thoroughness, and he will be respected for it.